Most engineers who use Argo think that they know Argo, but they know only Argo CD, maybe workflows. They sit at the CAPA exam and they blast through the first domain, and then Argo Events shows up and they lose a quarter of the exam. CAPA has 5 domains, all weights are equally at 20%. That sounds fair until you realize most of us have used maybe one of these tools in production. Argo isn't one project, it's 4. It's workflows, CD, rollouts, and events. One exam, 4 separate object models, and 0 shortcuts. Most CI/CD associate exams have an uneven weight split. You can lean on the heavy domain, skim the light one, and still pass. But CAPA doesn't let you do that. Every project costs the same if you don't know it. 60 questions, 90 minutes, and passing score is 75. 4 tools, 4 different object models, and I will go through the workflows, CD and rollouts first because they map to the things you probably touched before. Events is the last on purpose because it's the one with 0 real-world equivalent, and it's where I burned the most of the preparation time. Keep that in the back of your mind. Argo CD workflows runs direct acyclic graphs in pods. 2 things to know called. First, the direct acyclic graph template versus the steps template. DAG means you declare dependency explicitly. Task B waits on a task A because you wrote the dependency, not because it's listed as second. Steps means top to bottom, no dependency graph needed. The exam gives you the manifest and asks which style it is. If you have ever copy-pasted workflow YAML at work, this is where that habit costs you. The second, artifacts pass output between tasks. Once you've run one real workflow, this domain is close to free. Argo CD is the most people think they already know, and that overconfidence is exactly the trap. Prune True deletes the resources from the cluster that were removed from the Git. Self-heal True reverts manual changes someone directly did to the cluster. And 2 different failure modes, 2 different flags, and exam test them separately. If you only ever turned on the automated Prune True and Self-heal True and moved on, you've never had to think about which one does what, and that's exactly what gets asked. Rollouts sit on top of the deployment when you need the canary or the blue-green deployment. Canary splits live traffic by the percentage, both versions serve users at the same time, and the analysis run resource gates whether the traffic keeps increasing or not. Blue-green stands up as a full second environment, and then it swaps all the traffic at once via the active service or a preview service. The wrong answer on the exam is always the one that blurs both versions live and with an instant cutover. Those are opposite behaviors, know which one is which without hesitating. Here is the events domain, and I warned you about that. There are 3 components: event source, which listens to outside world, a webhook, or a file landing on the S3, or a Kafka message, or a schedule. Sensor subscribes to that event source and decides what to do about it, and triggers the action. Submit the workflow, create a resource, or call an endpoint. Event source listens, sensor decides, and trigger acts. I said this chain out loud probably 20 times before I stuck, because under the exam pressure the instinct is to swap the event source and the sensor. To think the thing is that listens is also the thing that decides, but it's not. Honestly, this domain took me the longest per question, even after I thought I'd nailed the model on paper. Sensor dependency questions and trigger conditions are where the real difficulty lives, not in the event source, sensor, trigger, and diagram itself. 2 weeks in total, 1 week on a study and 1 week on a practice test. What worked for me? For every project, before opening the docs, I wrote down what problem does this solution solve, and what its 3 main objects. That forces you to notice the moment you can't actually explain the difference between 2 things that sound similar. And it worked better than reading, because reading lets you nod along without noticing the gap. What also worked? Deploying all 4 projects on the same cluster, not the production grade, just enough to watch workflow actually run and rollout actually progress. Multiple choice questions find the gap between I read about this and I watch it happen. What didn't help? So going on Argo CD because I worked with it every day. and skimming events because the object model felt abstract on the page. I caught myself about 5 days in, and I had to consciously reallocate the time. The exam doesn't grade on how much production Argo CD experience you have, obviously, yeah, because it's the general projects exam, and it grades you on all 5 domains equally. If you only remember 3 types of the traps going in, the event source versus the sensor roles, the canary deployment versus the blue-green traffic behavior, and the self-heal versus the prune, those 3 account for more missed questions than anything else on this exam. I built the practice test exactly around those traps: the event source sensor swap, the self-heal versus the prune, and the canary versus the blue-green, plus direct acyclic graph versus the steps, and the fundamental questions that most guides skip. The practice test on the YetMike website, and I used it in the final week to find out which of the 5 domains I was actually weak in, not which one I felt confident about. Now let's speak about the results. I got the 93 points out of 100, and it was one of the exams on my path to the Golden Cube astronaut status. And the exam result is good not because I know Argo inside and out and I don't run the rollouts or events at work, but because I covered all the 4 projects at the same depth instead of leaning on the one that I already know. And I drilled the specific traps instead of just reading about them. So my recommendation: cover every domain, know the 3 or 4 traps for every project, and this exam is very possible in 2 weeks. Links below, see you in the next one.